All right. So, here's what I wonder. The La Jolla Law School Center for Juvenile Law. Why would they need those people? Why would they need those people? Let me tell you about what I found. The cop the cop gangs have groups inside of high schools and middle schools, right? Let me tell you about what a basic overview of what those groups will be doing. They essentially are some are high schools like sports guys that basically are in these hookup sites with fake ages and shit, and they go around doing the hookup site gang bang and stuff. And then after they do that, then they blackmail the woman, and then the cops come in, punishing her. That's what the cop gangs do. They basically let these high school gangbang guys, they let them be on the dark web's hookup site that all those cop gangs will be in. And that in that, you essentially get gang raped by cops if you fuck a kid in it. And so they set up the women that like to be gang banged in a hookup site. And that then they bring in these high school pretty boys. And that then, right after that happens, then the group of cop gang as a group comes in and punishes and basically satanically sex slaves the woman in a highly psychotic rape methodology. So they also operate a juvenile illegal sperm bank where they essentially find like middle school kids a lot of the times, and then they do forms of custody or fraud, basically paternal fraud or something like that. I forget the term. And that then they also run blackmail based forced prostitution. Then there's also chicks that do like the bling ring kind of stuff. They have those too. Ones that are do prostitution on their own. All these guys are always marketed to be doing prostitution for money also. And that they also run groups of people who do intimidations of essentially they'll be grooming children and blackmailing children, and that then those children also, once they get groomed and blackmailed, they get utilized as needed uploaded blackmail slaves. And that then these intimidation groups, they run intimidation that silences them. Then they do basically a victim's cyber isolation and torture, psychological torture methodology, kind of the stuff I've been talking about. And that is meant to basically to hack their devices, to isolate them to a dark web that keeps any public social media stuff from being divulged about it. And they also have groups that run essentially drug dealing, that then those drug dealers are basically in a drug war, usually with around here it's Mexicans, and that they usually run like an online drug Adderalls and Clonopins and oxys, and they've been moving into fentanyls. They usually do pills. They There's also side groups that furnish that stuff to those people. They're basically the drug dealers on the ground. And so then essentially like it becomes also like where all of these people in school are like voyeured for money, whether they agree to it or not. That's also what they do in it. So that's why I wonder, why do they have this? Because in my investigation of Cop Gang, see, the reality is that Cop Gang came and pushed me off my bike and then tasered me to the ground and then tried to charge me with a felony. So, Cop Gang made a huge mistake. I don't normally go around messing with people's gangs. I knew that they had a gang in this town. And that when Cop Gang came and messed with me, then that's where I researched gangs that fuck with me, like these stupid little pedophiles. These ones are kind of headed up in a more subversive way as like hipsters that kind of run these groups. And that is basically where I don't mess with gangs until they fuck with me. So, this school gang, this is basically philosophy. This is philosophy in that there's no teachers in it, okay? There's cops that are like witnesses, Bert and Ernie. There'll be two cops, Bert and Ernie. They'll be old. They'll be weird. One will be like trying to be cool, and then the other one will be like a really like detached idea about what gay is at everybody. And that then essentially the Mormon seminary students essentially run uh like a it's like an AI that scans for divulgement of information and shit. And so and they also work with the little stupid little pedophiles that are all tech psycho-y and little pedo-y wieners that like to do torture to people if they're divulging the information about it, okay? And so this is essentially the makeup of philosophy gang in the cops' overall cop mafia. So this is why I wonder why they have juvenile lawyers or something, and it might just be a coincidence. But I know that this stuff that the cop gangs do involve whole groups sometimes of high school and middle school students. And so this is what they do around here. One of the things that I know about stupid pedophile cops is that basically they build a structure or a boilerplate, and then that's where their little corruptive cop mafia shit basically does the same thing in all these other cities. And then I imagine that the LA sheriff is going to be the same thing. So that's where I really wonder because, this type of stuff can potentially move into a major federal investigation and then oversight. See, right now, I imagine that currently they can only get the unwillingness for cops to investigate themselves, basically, has the state of California, basically, or LA, or the LA area, basically. There's probably a lack of willingness out of the state currently to be investigating because essentially the infrastructure of the cop gang is to include all internal affairs, all like investigation groups, all federal investigators in the whole state and shit. And so with that comes people disregarding, man, I don't know, we're not gonna do it, we're not gonna do it. I mean, that's basically it. So my thought is that this is my guess, is that the reason this stuff has arisen is because basically they're the only ones that are willing to investigate. And it'll go to show you the corruptive nature of what cop gangs build. And that is where basically the breakdown of internal affairs, that's like where this, I've been looking into some of these news reports. Art is a rat, and internal affair, they intercepted internal affairs. This is like the same thing happened to me. I started narking off some of this stuff. I started putting things on FBI tip line. That stuff was intercepted in a similar theoretical way. And so the whole idea is that this currently sits as the beginnings of something that might have some strong central government forcing on these stupid little pedo bang fucking FBI agents. And that essentially what you might see is that based on some of my analysis, a solution of replacing those people, and then if they're like a millennial, then to get those people with like a Q clearance not a clearance, but that type of interrogation that's like, what'd you upload online? What'd you upload online? And then finding the ones that like sucked a wiener, butt fucked or gay app or something, or an orgy or something, okay? And then that being something that then gets divulged and then doesn't get used as an extortion. And then replacing that FBI agent with somebody that's thoroughly backgrounded against the extortion that they use on all the federal agents everywhere. Okay? Guys, essentially they've been running this cop gang shit for so long, like that article was stating, that essentially they have a whole procedural psychoping of all law enforcement all the time, and that they've built such an infrastructure of advancement that essentially you don't advance really until you blackmail into cop gang, and that then from that advancement happens as long as you don't do anything about cop gang. And so this is kind of it, and that the whole idea is that the news world is like commenting about this stuff now, and that then you get this lady that had her whole expose a year ago, and then when you see the stupid sheriff like talking backwards, and then a year later is now having to be subjected to full subpoenas and stuff. See, the schools in the county, that is where essentially some of those people can be forced to testify in this, and that this is where I was pretty impressed that they have full subpoena power, and that gives them, and that essentially I imagine that it's going to operate in somewhat of like a corporate arbitration style way of deposition arbitration with a judge of some sort, of federal judge. And so that is essentially where basically the juvenile laws, I wonder, because essentially these people operate under a belief that their behavior will be erased when they turn 18, and that technically that's true, but some of the gross, horrible nature of what they're doing potentially needs some sort of research on how to still prosecute them even if they're after 18 for what they were doing previously, because essentially it's not just an isolated criminal incident, it's a whole orchestrated, organized crime group. And that in most ways, basically it's like once they get out of school, once they get out of school, they kind of have like these like gang bang groups or whatever. Once they get out of school, then essentially they basically get into college, and that then the sporty spicies, they usually start doing things that would have them with a behind the scenes knowledge of what would be potentials for Jack Ryan's CIA agency recruitment checklists kind of stuff. That's kind of the path. A lot of it, sometimes it's like law for like prosecution or judges. Sometimes it's law enforcement. Sometimes it's like political science type of stuff. That's like after they get out of school, that is what they train at doing, some sort of placement, government placement. And so then they also have somewhat of like another path, which is to become somewhat of an artist of some sort, something that falls, journalism and that type of stuff. Okay, that stuff all falls under English, writing, fine art, all of that stuff. That's one where with these groups, these little high school gang that work with the cops on this, they move into our world. And then if they're like huge raging little pedophiles that always want to do pedophilia all the time, then they end up going to like church ministry or church college. And then they end up doing something that revolves around religion. It could be religious lawyers, it could be accountants for a major diocese kind of idea. I mean, that's kind of what it is. And so that is basically like what their theoretical after high school, like what types of things that they'll be moving into. And that then they'll eventually want to move those same groups over later on in life in the cop mafia gang. They'll essentially want to be placed with a whole groomed disregarding of cop gang mafia world as somebody that has some influence over decision making in the government somewhere. And so, who makes the decisions in the state of California about this stuff? Who makes the decisions in the county about this stuff? Who makes the decisions on West Coast or regional FBI? Who makes the decisions on whether to investigate this stuff? Because those people probably would have been a part in high school of some sort of theoretical idea. It's a little more organized and advanced, but that this cop gang mafia shit has been around since like the 1950s and shit. And that essentially the people that make the decision on internal affairs, all those people are all people that probably would have been involved with stuff like this with the cops in high school. And so that is where they have a whole infrastructure of placing these criminals in positions of government authority that gives them the ability to decide on whether something should be investigated. So that's where the whole criminal organization extends to people who make the decisions. And so this is the other thing that I wonder is that why does it end up being a citizen oversight? And that the people that are there to be the yay or nay on investigation are people that are involved in preventing it from being investigated. And so then those people are part of the corruption of it. And then those people are breaking the corruption laws and stuff. And so that's where, sometimes, maybe the governor should not be playing his like perfect PR analysis stuff. He should just force his fucking attorney general to be sparking one up. Just shove it right in that fucking sheriff's face. Fuck you.